Well, hey guys, welcome to another episode of Talent Talk. We're really excited to join you. I'm really excited for my guest. We met via LinkedIn, and he's just been really warm and cordial since we've gotten to interact over the last week or so. And so I'm really excited to have him on the show. And his name is Dr. Jeff Williamson. He's the author of a new ebook. Go find it on Amazon, called The Power of 168. And so I'm sure he'll get an opportunity to share a little bit more about the book. And so I'm looking forward. I haven't read it yet. I think it's on the wish list right now. So I'm looking forward to picking up a copy myself. And today we're going to be talking about the theme of strategic, which I'm excited about. I think I've always been a little talent envious of strategic. It's kind of in my middle. And so I can tap into it sometimes, but it's not one that I would say I claim. And so I'm really excited to hear more about how strategic shows up in Dr. Jeff Williamson's life today. And so I'm going to turn it over to him for him to introduce himself a little bit more and share what he does. And so Dr. Jeff, go ahead.
Thanks. Appreciate that. It's good to be with you and to connect with another strengths junkie. I refer to I refer to myself like that a lot of times, and people say, like, how long have you been doing this? I'm like, well, about 20 years actually. But my work has been primarily in higher ed, but I've also done a lot of executive coaching, teaching, training kinds of things, both related to strengths, but also leadership, communication, organizational behavior, those kinds of things. So I often say I'm a teacher, a trainer, and a coach, as far as my casual calling card, if you will. But it's fun. Even after 20 years, I still get excited talking about strengths and talking with people about their strengths and learning about them. It's just always been a great tool for me. So I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing that I found is when I hear other people talk about how a strength shows up in their life, like that's when I get the most insight. I'm like, oh, that's how that plays out. And that's what that looks like. And so I'm excited to learn more about strategic from you today. And so my first question to kind of get us rolling is, what do you love about having the theme strategic in your life?
Well, it's exciting to me because, as is the case with strengths, it's often our filter or the patterns by which we think about things. And so with strategic being my number 2 strength out of the 34, I just really automatically go to creating order when I think about things, whether it's a trip or a project or really anything in my life, is I love to sketch it out, to design a model, or to outline a presentation or an idea for a book or anything like that. So it often shows up with me creating order or trying to create order. And then of course, there's that balance of me not taking it so much to an extreme that folks who don't love my strategic so much, shall we say it that way? That I don't overwhelm them with my love for order and structure. So.
Totally. As you were sharing that, a couple of things I was thinking about is, can you take us into how strategic showed up and how you organized your book, and even some of the story of your new book? Because I think as you were telling me that story, it even showed some examples of strategic. And so.
Yeah, in terms of the idea for the book and how it's started to take form, it really does show the strategic piece. In the book, I talk about the case where I had this first conversation about 168 hours. For several years, I taught an introductory leadership course in a doctoral program. And during one of the breaks, a student came up to me who's, a professional with a family and a lot of commitments and things, and said, I don't know if I've got time to do this program or not. And in my head, I thought, yeah, you do. But I didn't respond that way outwardly. I said, well, let's think about that. if it's okay with you, I'd like to have that discussion when we get back together with the class, because the cohort, I figure there's somebody else in there that was probably thinking, oh, this is a lot of work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of on the fly, but again, my strategic brain kicking in, I just thought of the number 168, which is the number of hours in a week. And so when I went back in to the class and we started back up, I just wrote that number on the board, and then I turned around and just kind of stood there and looked at him. And it was silence. And I said, anybody know what this number stands for? Crickets. And I thought, in my thinking, I'm thinking, doesn't everybody know?
Yeah.
7 times 24, 168. We all get 160 hours no matter who we are. Well, they didn't get it right away. And so my strategic brain kicked in. So I started doing my 4th grade math problem. Like,
Yeah.
okay, let's take 168 and let's take a minus. How many hours do you sleep? How many hours do you work? And we went through this whole progression of life for like 30 minutes on the fly. But as a strategic thinker, I was really able to, we literally filled up a whiteboard with addition and totals and assignments of value to these different activities. And so it just kind of emerged in the moment. And then it resonated so well with that group that for the 5 or 6 years after that, I just did a talk on that intentionally as a part of the class. And so that's just one way that, the strategic just kicks in, and I can run with it and create that order of ideas as well. So yeah, it seemed to work pretty well in that situation.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And I think it shows like how, like that strategy of like, well, this is what we have, this is the framework, this is, and then how do we build around that?
Right.
And, I think sometimes when I think of strategic, I think of people who are really great with frameworks and developing models for people and just like ways of thinking, but then helping people get from point A to point B, because that was the end goal for the student. Was he had this project, he had this program that he wanted to get to through, and it's like, how do you get through that? And so I think that's an amazing example of strategic. And so but I don't want to leave it just there. And so what are maybe some other examples or stories that you have of how your strategic has showed up in your life that led to successful things?
Well, it is helpful both on a personal level and then professionally as a coach and a teacher, trainer type person. But on a personal level too, it was my 3 children are all 20 somethings that are now out living on their own, gainfully employed and all that kind of thing. But as they were, junior high, high school, I would sit down with them and say, hey, now this is just the beginning. I won't talk too long on this, but we would start to talk about things like goal setting and budget planning and, doing these scenarios where you'd say, well, let's just say you had a job and you made this much money and you had these categories. And so I think it's helped instill in them that ability to kind of map things out and sort out where they're at, using that same approach of creating some architecture to say, well, if I make this much, then I need to budget this much for housing and food and all those kind of things. So I guess in my personal life, it helped me as a dad to help them filter or sort and make decisions, that kind of thing as well. And then, coaching people too, whether it's one-on-one or like in the book, every so often I have some action steps. And I think that kind of structure is a thing to me, because it's giving people a directive or a guidance to say, okay, let's pause right here. Now think about the roles that you have. Think about your values and how can you align those better, and then give your time to those things that are most important to you.
Yeah, so good. And so I want to kind of move to one of my favorite things, and what makes, I think, CliftonStrengths so unique and such a valuable tool for each person is the idea of theme dynamics, and how your theme doesn't live in a vacuum, but
Right.
it's surrounded by other
Mhm.
talents that you have, and then those work out in unique ways. And so if you would round out, so strategic is number 2. So kind of what
Mhm.
is your next 5? And
Mhm.
then
Yeah, sure.
if you have like 6, 7, 8 that like you're
Yeah,
really
sure,
like
sure.
claim, just share some of
Yeah.
those.
Well, I'll just quick say my number one's maximizer, and I know you've had some good discussions about that one. Strategic's my number 2, and then 3 is learner, 4 is individualization, 5 is discipline, and then the 6, 7, 8 goes, focus, um, belief, futuristic. So I think that those are rooted. If you think about belief, that's really my values, my faith journey, and those kind of things, and integrating that into the strategic, integrating in that into individualization, where I really have an ability to see everybody uniquely and wonderfully for who they are, and not just going, oh, well, you fit in that box and that person fits in that box and that kind of thing. So it allows me to kind of bring those in, and then that futuristic helps me to kind of look over the horizon with folks, and help them to see what maybe they haven't seen in themselves. And that's one of the joys of coaching, is to help people see their capability and the possibilities that are real, that they're not just blowing smoke to make somebody feel better, but it's really connecting those with their strength set that's different than mine, and saying, oh my, you could use, empathizer or relator or, responsibility, whatever it would be, in beautiful ways that I'm not gifted with. And to help them see the potential that they have, that's so rewarding, to just see someone's lights kind of come on and go, you think I could do that? I'm like, of course.
Yeah,
Yes.
totally.
That brings a lot of joy to my days, for sure.
Well, 2 theme dynamics that I want to kind of poke your brain about there and
Mm-hmm.
how they kind of pair
Mm-hmm.
up is, so our previous episode was Debbie Dukes with Maximizer, but she has
Mm-hmm.
Maximizer surrounded by a lot of relationship building themes.
Mm-hmm.
And so for you, Maximizer and then
Mm-hmm.
strategic, like right there, how do you
Mm-hmm.
think those things
Yeah.
work together and create some kind of superpower for you?
I think my maximizer and strategic are often hitched up, if you will, with that individualization, because it
Mm-hmm.
allows, because that's my relator go-to there, is that not only can I really see people uniquely and beautifully as who they are, but I think they have a sense that I really do. And that helps people to feel seen and valued. I hope. And so, there's kind of that configuration that comes into play for me, because when people feel seen and somewhat understood, at least to begin with, and more deeply understood over time, I think that helps us connect, and we kind of feel like, hey, I'm in a trust space here where I can be me, I can be who I am at my best. And so I think that's always a great thing that I try to use. That's my top relator to create that sense of that, hey, I see you, I appreciate you for who you are and what you bring to the table. And so that kind of hitches those 3 together, at least in my journey.
Yeah, I hear this sense that like with that strategic and maximizer together, right off the get-go, there's this sense of like
Mhm.
you can point out what's really amazing
Mhm.
in people and
Right.
how they can develop that to like
Mhm.
self-realization for themselves. And
Yeah.
so I think when I think
Yeah.
about those 2 themes, just like
Mhm.
off in the distance working together.
Right.
And so um,
Yeah.
the other theme that I want to I'm always interested in this theme because it is my number 33 on my whole
Okay.
34. And so
Yeah.
it's discipline
Mhm. Yeah.
connected with strategic.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I for a lot of years I didn't know, like most of us, whatever our patterns, trends, strengths, whatever, we just kind of operate as if everybody has that or can do that. And it was probably just a couple years ago that I was speaking at a conference, and the focus was on strengths, and one of the individuals that put the conference together said to me, "You have discipline? That's one of the lowest strengths for men globally." And I was like, really? Wow. I somehow I had never connected or seen the visual or the data or whatever. And so, first of all, I had to kind of get over the fact that that was so rare, and I just thought, well,
Yes.
why is this so hard? But then once I received that and recognized that, and I've had other folks say to me, "Oh, help me with that. That's not in my top 20."
Yeah, totally.
And so I think I do just naturally pair that to that strategic to say, okay, here's what we could do. Here's some options for plan A, plan B, plan C, and those plans can help you to more systematize the things you want to do and be and accomplish, and maybe help them kind of see a flow of that. So I think the strategic can help people overcome that feeling of like, I don't even know where to start with strengthening my discipline or getting better, at whatever it is they're working on. And so, I think, plan your work and work the plan. And that's kind of how I would tend to help people with that. So that's a starting point, that it's looking at the plan and then sticking with it and seeing how that gets you in the long run to what you really want to do.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to kind of head to maybe, I think people always want to know about kind of the dark side, or where strengths can get in the way.
The what
and I
ifs,
think
yeah.
the what ifs,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we want to keep strengths in a perspective of like, no, they're strengths and they're used to like be successful and to use to improve your life, but they can get in the way. And so I think I want to ask you, what are some ways that you've seen strategic kind of get in the way and you've had to refine how you use it?
Yeah, that's a fair question. And I often say that, those top strengths can be a double-edged sword if we're not cautious, careful, and aware of that, because, you have someone like, say, strategic. Well, there's a lot of benefits for that, and I can really be helpful utilizing my strategic strengths. But at the same time, we don't necessarily need a sketched out model and a minute by minute breakdown of a trip to Disney World, right? We don't need all of that kind of specificity in every area of our life. And so, I was raised on, you're early to be on time. If you just roll in at the appointed hour, you're a little late, really. And so that could go to an extreme to where my strategic is like, hey, we're going out for dinner, and y'all said we were going to leave at 6:30, and I'm sitting in the car a little bit frustrated because nobody's there, and so what I have to do is to back up and say, you know what, we're going to dinner here. We're not leaving on a rocket launch to the moon. We're just going to be gone for a while. And they all know that I hate being late. They know that I hate getting somewhere 2 minutes after I plan to get there. But I have to work on my own patience and back up a little bit and say, not everybody's strategic or disciplined or, analytical is not far down there for me too. So I really have to just, the word grace comes into play when we think we're, kind of stepping on the accelerator of our top strength too much, and just not giving space for people to be who they are in their areas of gifts and talents. So sometimes it's just tapping the brakes and extending some grace. And I have to work at that.
I love that word picture for like that strength on just the accelerator all the way down to the floor. Because I think that's often like not just strategic, but any strength,
Yeah,
like that's
whatever
what
it is.
happens is it's like
Mhm.
we just lean into that so far
Yeah.
that it's overwhelming maybe for
Mhm.
other people, or
Yeah.
becomes not strategic for our own
Mhm.
lives.
Yeah, I was on a call yesterday with a friend where I'm going to be going to and doing an event for her organization, and it's all about soaring with your strengths. And woo was one of her top strengths, and she said something. We were talking about the question of retakes, and she said, I lost my woo, and I'm like, oh no, you didn't. No, 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 no. No, woos don't lose their woo. I said, it
Yeah.
may have slipped down to 6 for reasons I don't know, but you will never lose your
Yeah.
woo. It's
So,
just woven into the fabric of who you are. So,
yeah. Yeah. So I shared earlier that strategic is kind of like one of my, I don't know, strength envies, that it's like, oh,
yeah.
I wish I had more of that. I don't remember exactly where it's at. It's somewhere in like 13 to like
Mm-hmm.
20, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and and so because of that, I started thinking through like what are like combinations of my strengths that can
Mm-hmm.
bring out strategic. And so I think this is something that's great for other people. And so for me, I have futuristic and then maximizer 1, 2, and then adaptability at 5. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm like, oh, I can see how that combination of like being able to envision the future and then
Right.
asking, what is the
Exactly.
best thing for me to do? What's the most maximized thing
Right.
for me to do
Right.
in the moment?
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and like letting that become some kind of
Mm-hmm.
other form of strategic. And so as
Yeah.
you've coached other people, what are
Mm-hmm.
some other examples you might have of people who
Mm-hmm.
need, or maybe in a position, in a role that they need
Mm-hmm.
to be strategic, that's a
Gonna call on
important
that.
it's
Mm-hmm.
an important
Mm-hmm.
thing, and maybe some combos that you've seen that help them
Sure.
experience being
Yeah.
strategic.
Yeah, that's a good question. Whenever I'm talking to people about strengths that may be kind of in their mid-range, where it isn't, it's like their basement, it's their last one or something like that, and they're trying to think about how do I kind of call that up, if you will, to do a better job in that area. And I'll often take them to a conversation about leverage. You talk about leveraging other strengths toward the goal of the project, or the theme that you really feel like you need to lean on a little bit more. Like in this case, you're talking about strategic. So, example I would give, the first time I took my strengths finder and I looked at, some of the details and the ratings and the rankings, like I think everybody does. I didn't have as many relator or relationship building themes. And I thought, doggone it, I'm a pretty nice guy,
I have
and
no friends.
I'm like, come on, I got lots of friends. I'm a good dude. And so I was a little miffed, but that's a part of our deficit mentality that has been so embedded in most of us our lives until we encounter strengths and what's right about you. And so what I've realized that I've done over time is that I use two things. Is I I tap into that individualization, which is my top relationship building theme, but then I pair that with learner, so that I find that whether I'm coaching someone or whether I've just met someone at a dinner that I don't know, is I just ask them lots of questions. And that's my learner helping to focus in on them and show value of them. Because I think in most cases, if it's not just, rapid fire 20 questions, lamp over your head where you're interrogated, that kind of thing, most of us appreciate when someone shows interest in us. We just do. So it's like, hey, where'd you grow up? Tell me about your family. Or how did you get into this line of work? This is really fascinating. What attracted you to that job? Or what do you love about working with that organization? So my learner will lift up my relationship building themes because I'm strategically using that to show interest, to show that they have value, that they can teach me things that I don't already know.
That's awesome. Yeah. And so as we get kind of closer to wrapping up our
Mm-hmm.
time here,
Mm-hmm.
I want to kind of ask this question. I don't know where I'm going with that. But what are a couple ways that, and some development tips that you would have for people who have strategic to start moving that from talent to strength?
Right. Well, any development of a strength means that we use a muscle more. Anybody who's into fitness and focuses on that understands that, you know what, if I want stronger shoulders, I have to work my shoulders more. If I want, so on. And I see that the same with strength. So someone may say, sometimes when I'll do training, people say, I don't really see that, or I'm not sure how I feel about that, because they maybe haven't developed that talent much into a strength, and maybe haven't been in a role of responsibility where they really needed to, because what came naturally was, good enough, which I hate that phrase as a maximizer. But then is like, so if I was, someone who didn't really embrace strategic maybe right away, I would say to them, hey, because strategic is something that comes pretty natural to you, when you're in project groups or teams or groups that you volunteer with, if someone needs a person to develop like an event schedule or kind of a sequence plan of, we need to do A to Z to accomplish that, I would encourage them to say, volunteer for that, because your strength will come out of that talent you already have. And Dr. Clifton always said strengths and passion always come together. And so that individual is most likely going to enjoy that creating structure, architecture of ideas kinds of thing. So, I would encourage them to step into smaller applications or roles that they could do. And chances are good that they're going to really accelerate in that area, because it's already a talent they have, to where they're just going to be like, oh, I feel so much better about ways that I use my strategic strength now that I've really built up that muscle.
For sure. I'm thinking of, then that was like the workspace, but even it's like, okay, those opportunities might be few and far between for you. And it's like, man, what about in just your personal life of with your friends or your significant other, and just being like, hey, like, I'm going to organize a weekend trip or just like a day of fun, and like letting yourself use that strategic to plan just a day with those who you care about in your personal life.
Absolutely. I mean, that has, I haven't thought about that recently, but that's played out a lot of times, whether it was, well, let's plan a family gathering for extended family over the holidays, or let's plan somebody's birthday, or let's get together the buddies from college or whatever. Not always, but often I'm the person kind of going, I'll get that rolling. I mean, I was my high school class president back in the Ice Age, and with that high office, 155 or whatever in my high school class, is planning the reunions. So without fail, for the last years, we have had a reunion every 5 years without fail. And we were due for one this year that we postponed to next summer just because, well, getting together 80 or 100 people right now, not a great idea.
2020 pandemic, those things that happen.
But it, I was like, you know what? My strategic is part of, and my discipline is part of, like, we're going to get together every 5 years. We're going to do it because my crew keeps saying, yeah, we love this. We want, once in a while I say, you guys want to go to 10 years now that we're not so young? And they're like, no.
We need to do it every year now.
Yeah, for all those years, my strategic has really helped me keep that event going and get the ball rolling and reaching out to people and saying, hey, can you help with the venue? Hey, can you help with food? Can you email the information to people? Can we, and so we do those things together, but it really grows out of my strategic. And that's just a personal life fun thing that we do.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great example there.
Mhm.
Well, Dr. Williamson, thank you so much for joining me today. And
My pleasure.
for everyone, if you're looking for a coach to help you grow and leveraging your strengths, head over to Coach Mentor Guide and get in contact with Dr. Williamson, and go over to Amazon and download and purchase his new book, The Power of 168. I am planning on getting mine here in the next day or so. And so I'm excited to give it a read. And if you lead an organization and something like that, head over to joytal.com and you can get in contact with me on how to implement strengths within your whole organization. And so, yeah, I think that's all we have for today. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.